deep dive into Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
We've got all your reading list, your notes, even those dog-eared pages
Oh, yeah.
that I'm sure you've bookmarked.
Absolutely.
And today we're going beyond just summarizing the book.
Right.
We are really trying to extract those golden nuggets to help you understand how tiny changes can lead to remarkable results over time.
It's so interesting, right? There's so much emphasis put on these massive overnight transformations,
Right.
when in reality, it's the small, consistent actions that compound over time.
Yeah.
Much like how interest works.
Exactly. And you know what? The author's own journey is a testament to that.
Absolutely.
James Clear, the author, had this really intense experience in high school,
Yeah.
a near-fatal baseball accident.
Oh, wow.
He had facial fractures,
Oh, my God.
vision problems. He couldn't even walk straight for a while.
Yeah, it really puts things into perspective.
Yes, that's it.
Doesn't it? And this experience forced him to rebuild his life, quite literally, through small wins.
It's hard to even imagine having to relearn even basic motor skills, like walking in a straight line.
Yeah.
It took him 8 months to even be able to drive a car again.
Wow.
And that experience was the catalyst for his deep dive into habits.
Yeah.
It was a necessity.
Absolutely.
He had to meticulously document his recovery. He meticulously rebuilt his strength and skills.
Wow.
And eventually, his life, all through focusing on these tiny gains.
That's incredible.
It's an incredible example of how, even when life throws you a curveball,
Yeah.
these consistent small improvements can really lead to a total transformation.
Absolutely. And speaking of transformations, this idea that our habits actually shape our identity, this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah.
There's a powerful feedback loop at play here, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, think about it this way.
Mhm.
Our habits, they influence who we believe we are.
Right.
And then that sense of self, in turn, affects our actions.
Right.
It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
I mean, think about people who identify as, like, a voter. Research actually shows that they're more likely to go vote.
Yeah, because it's not just something they do, it's ingrained in their identity.
Right.
So let's apply that to your life.
No?
What if, instead of focusing on these goals, like, say, writing a novel, you shifted your thinking to becoming a writer?
Oh, that's a powerful reframe.
Yeah, it is.
It's not just about the outcome.
Right.
It's about embodying the type of person who achieves those outcomes.
And that can be a game changer.
It can be a game changer. Speaking of which, Clear lays out this simple yet powerful framework for understanding how habits work in the brain.
He breaks it down into 4 stages: cue, craving, response, and reward.
What immediately jumps out to you about those 4 stages?
I think what's so fascinating is, like, once that cycle is established, it can just run on autopilot.
Yeah,
And that's the double-edged sword of habits, isn't it?
it is.
Like, think about the smell of fresh cookies.
Yeah.
That's the cue. And it triggers that craving for something sweet, leading you to eat the cookie. That's the response. And then, of course, you get the reward of that delicious taste and feeling of satisfaction.
Yeah, and this cycle, repeated over time, just becomes automatic.
It does.
It makes habits incredibly powerful,
Yes.
but also potentially problematic if it's a bad habit you're trying to break.
It's true. That's where things get tricky.
Yeah,
But also where you can start making conscious choices about what habits to cultivate.
absolutely. Now, let's talk about something that might surprise people. The impact our environment has on our habits.
Right.
Clear introduces this concept called Lewin's equation, which basically says that our behavior is a function of the person and their surroundings.
It's a simple equation,
Yeah.
but it really highlights such a profound truth, right?
It does.
We often underestimate how much our environment shapes our actions.
Yes.
And there's this great example in the book about the Massachusetts General Hospital cafeteria.
Yeah.
They simply rearranged the food layout, and they were able to significantly shift people's eating habits.
It's wild. It really highlights how even subtle changes can have a big impact.
They really can.
So knowing this, how can we leverage our environment to support those desired habits?
Well, one strategy is to make the cues for good habits super obvious, and the cues for bad habits virtually invisible.
Okay.
We're wired to notice things that stand out, right?
Right.
So if you want to read more, try leaving a book on your pillow where you can't miss it.
Oh, I like that.
What about you?
Yeah. And conversely, if you want to cut down on screen time, maybe stash your phone in a drawer when you need to focus.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like strategically setting yourself up for success by designing your surroundings thoughtfully.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Make it easy for yourself.
Totally.
Set yourself up.
Absolutely.
Make it work for you.
Love it.
It's all about making those good choices just a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Now, Remember that example of the Polgar sisters we mentioned earlier?
Oh, yeah.
They were chess prodigies. And their story really underscores the influence of social norms and environment on shaping habits.
Oh, that's right. I'd love to hear more about them.
Okay.
What made their story so remarkable?
Well, their father, Laszlo Polgar, was a firm believer in the idea that geniuses are made, not born.
Okay.
He deliberately crafted an environment for his daughters that was completely immersed in chess.
Wow.
They homeschooled, they started playing at a very young age,
Okay.
and they constantly competed against each other and other strong players.
So he basically created this like mini chess universe for them.
Exactly, and the results speak for themselves.
Yeah.
All three daughters became incredibly strong chess players.
Wow.
Susan, the oldest, became the first woman to earn the Grandmaster title through standard competition.
Okay.
And Judith, the youngest, is widely considered to be the strongest female chess player of all time.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
It really highlights how powerful the right environment can be.
it really is.
And it makes me wonder, what are some practical things we can do to design our own environments to make it easier to cultivate those good habits?
Well, one strategy is to create separate spaces for different activities.
Okay.
So if you're working from home, try to have a dedicated workspace.
Right.
This helps your brain associate that specific space with a particular activity. It's all about context.
Well, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've definitely noticed that when I try to work from my couch, it's harder to focus.
Right.
It's like the lines between work and relaxation get all blurred.
Exactly. The goal is to create that mental distinction between different modes.
Okay.
So having a dedicated workspace can signal to your brain, okay, it's time to focus now.
Now, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another powerful element in habit formation,
Okay.
making good habits satisfying.
Yeah,
It all boils down to how our brains are wired.
absolutely. Our brains are wired to prioritize immediate gratification.
Right.
So we need to find ways to work with this tendency, not against it. It's like we need to hack our own reward systems.
Exactly. And Clear offers some clever tactics for doing just that.
Okay.
He talks about this fascinating study in Pakistan
Okay.
where they used nicer smelling soap to make hand washing more enjoyable.
Interesting.
Can you guess what happened?
I'm intrigued. Did it actually increase hand washing rates?
You bet. Making the act of hand washing more satisfying led to significant and long-lasting behavior change. It even had this positive ripple effect, improving hygiene practices in the community.
That's amazing.
Yeah,
So simple, yet so effective.
it really is.
It shows that even small tweaks to make the experience more enjoyable can have a big impact on whether a habit sticks.
Yeah,
So how can we apply this to our own lives?
that's the question, isn't it?
Well, I've personally had a lot of success with something called temptation bundling.
Oh, tell me more.
It's basically pairing something you want to do with something you need to do.
Okay.
So, for example, I only let myself watch my favorite show while I'm on the treadmill.
I love that.
You're basically piggybacking on an existing reward system to make a less desirable activity more appealing.
Exactly.
I love that.
Now, what about those stubborn bad habits that seem impossible to break? What strategies does Clear suggest for making those less tempting?
Well, one approach is to increase the pain of giving in to the bad habit.
Okay.
It's about adding immediate consequences to your actions, not just relying on those long-term benefits.
Right. Clear talks about habit contracts, where you formalize your commitments, even adding penalties for slipping up.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't he share a story about a guy who used this to lose weight?
That's right, Brian Harris.
Oh, yeah.
If he missed his fitness goals, he had to pay his trainer.
Oh, wow.
Or even worse, his wife.
Oh, no.
Talk about high stakes.
Wow, that's commitment.
Yeah,
It really highlights how adding that external accountability can provide that extra push.
it really can.
But, even without going to those extremes, having an accountability buddy can make a world of difference.
Oh, absolutely. It could be a friend, family member, or even a coach.
Right.
Anyone who can support you and keep you on track.
Yeah.
Sometimes just knowing someone else is aware of your goals is enough to keep you going.
Absolutely. Speaking of staying on track, Clear makes a great point about the power of habit tracking.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
It's such a simple but effective way to monitor progress and stay motivated.
There's something so satisfying about checking off a box on a calendar, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. I find that visual representation of my progress really helps me stay focused on the process, not just the outcome.
Yeah,
It's like a little pat on the back for every step you take in the right direction.
It really is.
And Clear emphasizes that it doesn't have to be complicated, A simple notebook or even just a tally mark on a piece of paper can do the trick.
The key is to find what works for you and stick with it.
Now, let's talk about a concept that really resonates deeply with me.
Okay.
Finding your zone of genius.
Yeah, love that.
What did Clear have to say about that?
Well, he emphasizes that our genes influence our natural abilities and predispositions.
Yeah.
And while they don't dictate our destiny, they do point us towards areas where we might excel more effortlessly.
So it's not about limiting ourselves, but rather playing to our strengths.
Exactly. Think about Michael Phelps, the Olympic swimming champion.
Okay.
He's genetically gifted for swimming, long torso, short legs, unusually flexible ankles,
Wow.
large
It's
hands.
like he was born to swim. But not all of us are Michael Phelps.
Of course not. And that's where it becomes crucial to identify your own unique strengths.
Yeah.
It's about paying attention to what feels effortless and enjoyable for you.
Just like finding those activities where you get lost in the flow, where time seems to fly by.
Exactly. And remember, this doesn't mean you can't succeed in areas where you're not naturally gifted.
Okay.
It just means you might have to put in a bit more effort.
It's about working with your natural inclinations, not against them.
Exactly.
So if you're naturally introverted, maybe forcing yourself to be a super social butterfly isn't the best strategy.
Right. Maybe you'd thrive more in a role that allows for deep work and solitary pursuits.
Okay, so we've talked about making good habits satisfying.
Right.
But how do we actually increase that sense of satisfaction in a tangible way?
One really effective strategy is to use habit tracking
Oh, yeah.
as a way to monitor your progress and stay motivated.
I love habit tracking.
Yeah.
There's something so rewarding about checking off a box or marking an X on a calendar.
It's that visual representation of your hard work, right?
It is.
It's proof that you're sticking with it.
Right.
Plus, it shifts your focus to the process, not just the end goal.
Right.
Yeah.
And Clear emphasizes that it doesn't need to be fancy.
Right.
A simple calendar or a notebook can work wonders.
Even a tally mark on a piece of paper can be enough to keep you going.
I love it.
The key is to find a system that resonates with you and stick to it.
Now let's talk about a concept that can really make or break your habit-building efforts.
Let's do it.
Accountability.
Ah, yes. Accountability. It's like having this external force keeping you honest and on track.
Yes, absolutely. Think about it. We're much more likely to follow through on a commitment if we know someone else is expecting us to.
Right. Clear talks about those habit contracts where you formalize your
Yes.
commitments,
Yeah.
even adding in penalties for slipping up.
Oh, yeah.
Remember the story of Brian Harris, who used one to lose weight?
Yes.
If he missed his goals, he had to pay up either to his trainer
Oh,
or, even worse, to his wife.
oof.
Talk about upping the ante.
Yeah. But it worked for him, and it highlights how powerful external accountability can be.
It really can.
Even if we don't go to those extremes, having an accountability partner, a friend, a family member, or coach can make a huge difference.
Absolutely.
Sometimes just knowing someone else is aware of your goals can be enough to stay motivated.
It's like having a cheerleader in your corner.
Exactly. Now let's talk about this concept of continuous improvement.
Okay.
It's not just about establishing a habit, but constantly refining it.
Right. Precisely. Clear emphasizes that even tiny adjustments, made consistently, can lead to significant gains over time.
Yeah.
He uses this analogy of British cycling.
Okay.
For years, they were mediocre.
Oh.
But then they hired Dave Brailsford, who implemented this philosophy of the aggregation of marginal gains.
Oh, wow.
I love that phrase.
So they focused on optimizing every tiny detail,
They did.
like even the type of pillows the cyclists used.
Exactly. They made small improvements to every aspect of the sport. The bikes, the training regimens, the riders' diets, even the pillows, as you said, and the result.
Yeah.
British cycling went from being an underdog to a dominant force in the sport.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a powerful testament to the idea that small changes, when consistently applied, can lead to remarkable results.
For sure.
So how do we apply this to our own habit-building endeavors?
Well, one strategy Clear suggests is habit shaping.
Okay.
You start with a super tiny version of the habit and gradually increase the difficulty over time.
It's like that saying, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time.
Exactly. Break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
Yeah.
And remember, it's perfectly okay to start small.
Right.
Even a 1-minute meditation is better than none at all.
It's all about building that momentum and consistency.
Exactly.
Now, let's dive into a slightly more philosophical concept.
Let's do it.
This idea that our brains are constantly seeking pleasure and avoiding pain.
That's wired into our very being.
It is.
It's what kept us alive for centuries.
Right.
But in today's world where temptation lurks around every corner,
Oh, I know.
it can be a bit of a double-edged sword.
We can easily get caught up in the pursuit of those instant gratifications,
Right?
even if they don't serve our long-term goals.
Exactly. So the key is to shift our focus from immediate gratification to long-term satisfaction.
That sounds great in theory, but how do we actually make that shift?
One powerful way is to reframe how we think about delayed rewards. Instead of seeing them as sacrifices, think of them as investments in your future self.
Oh, that's good.
So instead of saying, I can't eat that cookie, you could say, I'm choosing to invest in my health by opting for a healthier snack.
I like that.
And when you view your efforts through that lens, it becomes easier to make those choices that align with your long-term goals.
Yeah.
It's about playing the long game, not just chasing those quick wins.
This brings up something I've always struggled with.
What's that?
That tendency to overestimate the pain of doing something I don't want to do.
Oh, yeah.
Like, going to the gym always seems way more daunting in my mind than it actually is once I get there.
You're not alone. Our brains are wired to avoid discomfort.
Right.
But the reality is the anticipated pain is often much worse than the actual experience.
It really is.
And on the flip side, we tend to overestimate the pleasure we'll derive from indulging in a bad habit.
That piece of cake never tastes as good as I imagine it will.
It never does.
It never does.
So how do we combat this? One simple but powerful strategy is to just start.
Just do it.
Exactly. Often, taking that first step is the hardest part.
It is.
And by repeatedly proving to ourselves that the pain we anticipate is often less intense than we imagine,
Yeah.
we build resilience and confidence.
Speaking of taking action, another challenge many of us face is procrastination.
Procrastination, it's the ultimate productivity killer.
It is.
One effective strategy is to make the task as specific and actionable as possible.
Okay.
Instead of saying, I need to exercise more, try saying, I'm going for a 20-minute walk at lunchtime today.
It's about removing any ambiguity, making it crystal clear what needs to be done.
Exactly. Another helpful approach is to break down large, overwhelming tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks.
There's that elephant analogy again, one bite at a time.
Precisely. By focusing on completing just one small step, we can make progress without feeling overwhelmed.
And sometimes it's as simple as changing our environment to minimize distractions and make it easier to focus. Like, if you're working from home, set up a dedicated workspace in a quiet room away from the TV and the fridge.
Exactly. Create an environment that supports your desired behavior.
Love it. Now let's talk about another mental hurdle that can trip us up.
Okay.
Perfectionism.
Yes, that fear of not being good enough can really hold us back.
You can.
Clear's advice.
Yeah.
Embrace the idea of good enough.
Oh, I like that.
It's about letting go of the need to be perfect and focusing on consistent progress.
Right.
He talks about the concept of minimum viable product. Get something out there, even if it's not perfect,
Okay.
and then iterate and improve over time.
So don't let the pursuit of perfection become the enemy of progress.
Exactly. And by repeatedly proving to ourselves that imperfect action is better than no action at all, we build confidence and momentum.
This reminds me of how ingrained habits become, especially the bad ones.
Yeah.
It's like they're on autopilot.
That's the nature of habits.
Right.
They're those automatic actions we perform without much conscious thought.
Right. So how do we break free from those negative patterns? What are some strategies for interrupting those unhelpful autopilot sequences?
Well, one is to identify the cue that triggers the bad habit
Okay.
and find a way to disrupt it.
Okay.
So if late night snacking is your nemesis,
Yeah.
maybe don't keep snacks in the house.
Out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. Or if you're trying to reduce screen time, leave your phone in another room while working.
Okay.
Make it harder to engage in the bad habit by removing or modifying the trigger.
I like that. So it's not about willpower. It's about being strategic.
Absolutely. And remember, you can also change your response to the cue.
Okay.
So instead of reaching for a snack when stressed, go for a walk or call a friend.
Replace the negative behavior with a positive one.
Precisely. By consistently choosing the positive response, we gradually rewire our brains and weaken that connection between the cue and the bad habit.
So it's not about being perfect, but about progress.
Exactly. And it's
Yeah.
important to remember that you're not alone in this journey.
We all face setbacks and challenges along the way. The key is to keep learning, experimenting, and finding what works for you.
That brings up a really important point that Clear makes.
Yeah.
It's not just about individual habits, but about the overall system you create.
So it's like creating an ecosystem where good habits can thrive.
Exactly. He uses the analogy of a garden.
Okay.
You can't just plant a seed and expect it to grow without tending to the soil,
Right.
providing sunlight and water, and protecting it from pests.
So building better habits is about cultivating fertile ground.
Precisely. And that means paying attention to all the aspects we've discussed: your identity, your environment, your reward system, your accountability structures, and your commitment to continuous improvement.
It's about taking a holistic approach.
Absolutely. And one final thought I want to leave you with: be patient with yourself.
Yes.
This is something Clear emphasizes throughout the book. Building better habits takes time and effort. It's a journey, not a destination.
Yeah,
There are no overnight transformations or quick fixes.
that's right.
It's about making those small, consistent changes and celebrating the wins along the way. They really are like fuel for the habit-building fire.
They are.
They remind you that change is possible, that you're making progress.
And that, I think, is the real magic of Atomic Habits.
Yeah.
That belief that even tiny changes, when compounded over time,
Right.
can lead to extraordinary results. So as we move forward, try to be mindful of those small choices you make throughout the day.
Because it's those seemingly insignificant choices repeated day after day
Yeah.
that ultimately shape who you become.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive into Atomic Habits. What are your biggest takeaways?
I think for me, it's the power of shifting your focus from goals to identity,
Right.
designing your environment for success, and remembering that even small improvements made consistently can
Yes.
lead to remarkable transformations.
I completely agree. And what about you listening in? What resonated most with you? What are you going to try out today?
Pick one small habit you'd like to build or break, and apply just one or two of the techniques we discussed today.
Because even the smallest changes, when repeated consistently, can lead to truly extraordinary outcomes over time.
Until next time, keep diving deep.
And keep building those atomic habits.